This is Street Knowledge with Chris Graham.
Welcome to the podcast. I'm Chris Graham. I'm joined, of course, by Jeff Fife. It's Thursday. I say, of course, because that's what we do. We talk with Jeff on Thursdays. So, Jeff, there's a lot going on. Boy, I'm sure later in the show we'll talk a little bit of Vince McMahon XFL, but Virginia Duke, this is like, there's an actual Super Bowl coming up in a few days, football Super Bowl, but for Virginia fans, Virginia basketball fans, this feels like the Super Bowl, WrestleMania, Christmas, and New Year's all wrapped into one.
And I'm dressed, ready for it already. It's Thursday, and I'm in a suit. I am so excited. It's sort of like my senior fifth at the end of a football game. I am in a suit and tie, but it's Thursday, and that's also my Rotary Day. So hence why I get all decked out. Yeah, the excitement and enthusiasm and rest. It's interesting when you watch the ACC standings and us at 8-0. Every time we meet and talk on these Thursdays, you keep thinking we're going to talk how did someone finally beat us? Yeah. Well, that's not going to be the topic of conversation. And is Duke going to be that one that finally does? And I don't understand exactly how we're sitting at 8-0 and I see teams at 3-3. We seem to have played more games than anybody else in the ACC at this stage. And we get that joyful 4-day break between the Clemson pounding. Boy, that was fun to watch. And the Duke game. Does Tony do anything special or different in preparation for Duke with the extra time that he has?
It's probably more than the extra time up. They're probably looking at more like it's time to sort of collect things here. Virginia played 3 games in 6 days to get this 4 days off. The wins on the road at Georgia Tech, at Wake Forest last Thursday, then last Sunday, and then you play the quick turnaround Tuesday at home. The ACC does that a few times a year to several teams where you have that stretch because it sort of mimics the NCAA tournament. And that's a good thing because obviously, if you're in the ACC, even if you're projected bottom 5 of the ACC in the preseason, you still think you're an NCAA tournament team. So, playing Sunday then Tuesday, think about the first 2 weekends of the NCAA tournament, actually even the third weekend. You play either Thursday, Saturday, Friday, Sunday, and so good. It's a good thing. Now they're looking at it like, okay, chance to breathe a little bit. You could kind of see the first half against Clemson Tuesday that was a tired team. There were some issues there with I'm not sure as much physical fatigue as there was some mental fatigue, and then they turned it on, and Clemson is still tired to say the least out of that. But so getting ready for Duke. I mean, Duke also has the same amount of time. I mean, they. Minus 2 hours. Virginia's game started at 7. Duke's game started at 9, I think, that night. So, but they also played Tuesday night against Wake Forest on the road at Wake. Not a very long trip for Duke from Durham to Winston-Salem. But, they both get time to prepare for each other. And I bet both coaching staffs love the probably extra day. I mean, because I guess Wednesday was probably a recovery day for both those programs. The extra day for Duke to prepare for the pack line, to prepare for the mover blocker offense, and for Virginia to figure out a way to prepare for nothing special X's and O's wise from Duke, but some very talented young men.
Big physical kids. You've got a lot of interesting, and you wrote about this on the website. There's some interesting dichotomies with these two teams, and you've got the youthful exuberance and lack of experience versus a more senior-laden team that's built a little bit different. Let's talk about that point first. What's the line, out of curiosity? Has the line come out yet?
I can look that up real quick. I look at KenPom.com, the prognostication guru. It's not a Vegas betting line type thing. But he has Duke a 1-point favorite. I'd imagine it's probably 2 or 3 from Vegas' standpoint. Ken Palm actually has Virginia with a 47% chance of winning as of the last time I checked that number. Actually, this is the only game that he has Virginia losing the rest of the season, which is frightening for Virginia fans to even hear that out loud because, of course, we're assuming like that somebody's going to break a pinky or have an appendix fall out of them during a game, and then we have more to deal with. But the breakdown dichotomy-wise, there's the young versus old. It's a Duke team with largely a 6-man rotation. Maybe you can say there's a 7th man. But Coach K is using a very, very short bench, and of his top 6 guys, 5 are freshmen. And then there's Grayson Allen, who feels like he's got. They probably call him Grandpa. because he's a senior, and he's been a guy that actually, Grayson Allen came there not quite as a one and done, but I think after his sophomore season, a lot of folks thought he would be a first-round draft pick. I think after last season, people thought he'd be a first-round draft pick. He's still there. But then you've got those freshmen, and really it comes down to, there's Marvin Bagley, who is probably not only going to be the Rookie of the Year, but probably going to be the Player of the Year in the ACC. Averages 21 points a game, 11.5 rebounds a game, and does everything but hit mid-range jumpers and beyond. Wendell Cook, who's, and Bagley's 6'11", Wendell Cook's 6'10", and Cook, if it wasn't for Bagley, Cook would be the guy we're all talking about. He's averaging 14.5 points, about 9.5 rebounds a game. Shoots better from the field, a little better from the field than Bagley does. Bagley's like 61%, and Cook is about 62.5%. They're both great offensive rebounders. Then you got Gary Trent Jr. If you're a Virginia fan of longer-term vintage like Jeff and I are, you'll remember Gary Trent, the Shack of Mac, because Ohio U, the team that Gary Trent Sr. played for, back in the, I think it was 95 season, won a preseason NIT game at Virginia. The Shack of the Mac, Gary Trent Jr. was 6'6" or 6'7", but played in the post. Big, strong, burly guy. His son, Gary Trent Jr., is 6'6", but he plays guard, and he's actually their best, I think even better than Grayson Allen, best weapon on the perimeter. He shoots 43% from three-point range. He gets in the lane. Then you got Allen, so you've got talent there. They're all 5 positions on the floor. They're NBA players. Probably next year, because Allen's a senior. He's got to go in the draft this year, and I think the other 4 guys are probably NBA players too. But that's the only thing that is a limitation for this Duke team is that they're all so good that Coach K doesn't want to get them off the floor, because the second wave, whatever second wave there would be, there's a big drop-off in talent from 5 even to 6. And so, the problem then for Duke is there's one guy of their group, Wendell Cook, is prone to foul trouble. Fouled out twice. He had 4 fouls in 7 other games this year. If he gets in trouble, then what happens to that whole chemistry there? That's a big question for them. They have to go small, and then they have to play a lot differently. So, whereas Virginia, of course, veteran team. I mentioned in the column 2 redshirt seniors. There's a senior, Isaiah Wilkins, who's a 4th-year senior, a 4th-year junior, redshirt junior in the form of Jack Salt, of your 8-man rotation. And then you got the 3 sophomores and a redshirt freshman who's basically a sophomore as well. So yeah, a lot of experience on Virginia's side, a lot of talent, but youth on Duke's side.
Another obvious difference between the 2 squads is one is the top defensive team in the country, and the other is one of the top, if not the top, offensive team in the country in terms of efficiency. It doesn't feel like it's going to come down to who gets to play whose tempo, right, but really who.
Because they'll play Virginia's tempo.
Yeah, they'll. But who's who? So is there? What's going to give? Hard to say.
When I broke it down, looking at these 2 teams, I actually think this is a great matchup for Virginia this year. This Duke team's a great matchup for Virginia, even better than last year's team. Jason Tatum last year, a guy now playing in the NBA with the Boston Celtics, playing pretty well for the Boston Celtics, a guy at 6'8", who could penetrate with the dribble drive and really disrupt things. Virginia, the pack line defense, the one vulnerability, because some people will say the vulnerability is that Tony Bennett's willing to give up contested threes. He doesn't want to give you much anything else, but he'll give you a contested 3. I think that the true vulnerability of it is NBA talented guards or small forwards who can dribble drive can just, when they get past their guy, the pack line's not designed. There's not a shot blocker back there. There's nobody hanging out in the back line because there's so much shuffling going on with all the guys trying to double team and then get back and everything else, that if you get past your guy on a dribble drive, you got to lean to the basket. And so Tatum could do that. But there's really, I don't see anybody on this Duke team this year that can do that. I see this Duke team as being a team. You got Allen and Trent on the perimeter. And their point guard, whose name's escaping me right now, is also he's not quite he's not the classic, even a Joe Barry type point guard, the North Carolina point guard, who can get in the lane and kind of cause some havoc in there. What they're set up to do is, they got 2 elite NBA top 10 draft pick guys as freshmen to dump the ball into. They're 6'10" and 6'11". They're both big, strong kids, and who finish shooting over 60% each from the field. So what they expect teams to do is either try to zone them if you zone that team, then you've got those 3-point shooters ringing out. It's kind of like LeBron, how you build around LeBron James in the NBA. Everybody so focuses on him that you have spot up guys around the 3-point line, and if they focus too much on LeBron, then you hit the open three. Well, they got two guys to draw your attention in the post. So so they dump the ball in, and if you double them, they dump it back out. You shoot the three, and you're happy either way. They shoot 37% from three. It's a pretty good ratio. I'll let you ask a question, but Virginia's got a solution. I think Virginia's post-to-post doubles are the solution to the problem that Duke presents almost everybody this year.
And that's exactly where I was going to go on the post-to-post doubles, because I remember Okafor getting shook when the double came down low, but he didn't have another big that he could dump it to. So I'm wondering if the curious of the magic of Duke beating the pack line is not as much passing it out to the perimeter and popping the three, but can they get that second big man down low on the baseline and get that pass into him? We see our big men, Jack Salt had a little bit better hands against Clemson, but occasionally when he's free down low, he doesn't always catch the pass or finish as strong as he could. These kids don't have that problem. I'll be fascinated on the assist to turnover ratio from the big boys. And if they're tossing the ball around down low, if they're moving a little faster than what they're accustomed to, and they're getting approached in a different angle with those post-to-post doubles, I think that's going to be a real big difference in this game.
Yeah, Trevon Duval's the point guard. His name escaped me, everything else. He's a 6'3" point guard. Shoots 45% from the field, but 27% from three-point range. So he's not the guy. The two key guys are Trent and Allen there, and so yeah, the post-to-post double. I was even explaining this a little bit to my wife in the office the other day, how the post-to-post double works. You were alluding to it there too. Most teams, when they double a guy in the post, you double with a guard. So the guard who pounds the ball in the post, then whoever's defending that guard drops down. So the double's coming from outside, and it's also a smaller guy. If say Grayson Allen dumps the ball in to Marvin Bagley III, Ty Jerome's guarding Grayson Allen, let's just say, and so behind Marvin Bagley III, let's say it's Jack Salt, he's 6'10", and then you got a 6'5" guy coming down that Bagley can obviously see over. He's 6'11". And so he's got, and the angle where that double comes from, you can just you can see, you have a line of sight, and you've got a guy who's open over there too. What Virginia does, they don't do the guard double. They don't do a guard post double. They do what's called a post to post double, and it requires flexibility, speed, and everything else from the post. So teams will set up guys on either side of the lane. That's the post. You dump the ball into Bagley. The post doesn't come from the guard on the perimeter dropping down. It comes from the other side of the lane. The other post comes over. So you've got 6'10" Salt there guarding Bagley. You've got Isaiah Wilkins or Mamadi Diakite or DeAndre Hunter coming over. 6'7", 6'8", 6'9" guy coming over. Now, yes, anytime you double somebody, that means someone else is left open. This means that the other, Wendell Cook in this case, is the one left uncovered. But the angle of that and the approach of that double team coming from across the lane with hands up in the air means he doesn't have a sight line towards the other post. Also, Virginia's guards will crunch down, not to guard. I mean, you're not going to have Kyle Guy stop Wendell Cook or Kyle Guy stop Marvin Bagley III, but at least just be an obstacle to make, to slow his roll to the lane or to the rim. And then also that angle's not there, so you tend to kick it out. Instead of kicking it to the other post, you tend to kick it back out. And what happens then is, because if the ball's coming from the wing or the front, whichever direction it's coming from, the guard hasn't left there. So there's nobody open right in your immediate area. The opening tends to be cross court, because the UVA guard defender who has to crunch down to prevent the post, who's been left open by the post-to-post double from getting in the lane, getting a dunk, he's across court. So you see a guy over here. You're on the left. You're on the right block, and you look and you see a guy at the 3-point line, elbow extended, 20 feet away, and you see a lane there. But there's also somebody sort of lurking, sort of like in football, a quarterback who can't see the safety in his own coverage underneath, because he sees the cornerbacks, but he doesn't see that one guy that is staring him right in the face. Virginia gets a lot of steals on those cross-court passes that look like gold, but they're not gold. They're fool's gold. And these two guys, as good as they are, shooting and rebounding and everything else, turnover-prone. Cook and Bagley both are among they're two of the top three in the ACC in post turnovers per game. In fact, Bagley's first in the ACC in turnovers per game. And so you have a lot of you have two guys who are already turnover prone, and you have a defense in Virginia's defense. The way it's set up is designed to make those guys turn the ball over. So, that's why I think that Virginia has an advantage. Now there is a disadvantage, and I'll throw the word out, and you'll remember we've talked about this the last couple of weeks. Rebounding is where Duke has. They can make up that difference advantage. There. Yeah.
I'm gonna. I love. It's amazing. I wish we could do these videos and if folks could see Chris get fired up. He's just an analytical guy. You give him a flip chart, a whiteboard, and let him draw up this defense and how it works. We need to put you on ESPN next to Seth Greenberg and Jay Williams. So I'm going to ask you a bizarre analytical question. This may be even more geeky than we could ever imagine. Let's take a look at what number do you think is going to be higher, and how is that going to have the outcome on the game? And this is even too much for me. The foul count between Salt, Wilkins, Mamadi, and Hunter versus the turnover count for Duke. Which do you think is going to end up being higher? And I'll give you. Let me give you a over/under on the fouls. Let's say 12 between those four. Down low. What do you think we going over under on those fouls, and do you think we're going to have more turnovers that we create from Duke or more fouls from our big men?
More overall turnovers for Duke?
Yeah.
Overall turnovers, I think you'll have more Duke turnovers than those fouls because this year Virginia's defense, the backline defense is not designed to cause turnovers. It's really interesting. But Virginia this year, according to KenPom.com, is 11th in the country in turnover percentage by opponents. The other night we saw Clemson 19 turnovers and 62 possessions. I mean that's close. It was right at 30%. We saw them do the same thing or similar numbers with Syracuse, UNC, in those wins. This Duke team's and this Duke team is turnover prone. They're young. That's one thing. I mean they also they play a lot of possessions. They're third in the ACC in overall turnovers per game. Because they have their games play to a lot of possessions. This game won't play. They play to 72 possessions a game. Virginia plays to just under 60 per game. This game's going to be closer to the 60 certainly than the 72. But yeah, this Duke team, even their point guard Trayvon Duval is a little turnover prone. 6 assists a game, but he's a freshman point guard. He's looking for the big pass, not the easy pass necessarily. So now Virginia will have, and it's really going to be a matter of who the fouls are on. Among those four you mentioned, the 4 post guys. Virginia will not be able to withstand 2 quick fouls to Isaiah Wilkins. If we get to the first media timeout and he's already got 2 fouls, it's going to be a long day or a short day, depending on your perspective on that. But there's also on the other side, I mentioned that Carter is foul prone. He's fouled out twice. He's had 4 fouls 7 times this year. What you do with him, you don't attack him the same way you don't attack Duke's bigs the same way that they'll attack Virginia's bigs. Duke will attack Virginia's bigs the way basketball teams have always attacked in the post. They'll dump the ball in, and you have to defend those guys. Virginia's bigs aren't that. You're not going to see Jack Salt maybe get more than 1 pass in the post in this game. He did. He had a nice little jump hook against Clemson, so give him credit for that.
Nice to the left.
But largely what creates offense in the post for Virginia's bigs, when they're setting their screens in the mover blocker offense, they're constantly setting screens. And I implore our listeners out there, and even you, Jeff, you have to kind of train yourself to do this. But when you're watching a Virginia game, maybe when you're watching a replay of a game, every once in a while, just watch Wilkins or just watch Salt, particularly those 2 guys, because they've been in the system so long. Just watch them on a possession. Don't watch the ball. Just watch those guys setting screens. They're doing it all the time. They're either the lane wide or the baseline screens. And so the way Virginia creates most of its offense for its post guys is they're basically cutting off the screens. They're setting the screen, and then the defense focuses so much on those guards. You got Kyle Guy and Devin Hall, both of whom are on KenPom.com's first team All ACC because of their offensive efficiency and defensive efficiency. You got Ty Jerome, who had 31 points against Boston College. You got to respect those guys coming off screens. You got to respect Hunter coming off a screen. You got to respect Nalda Johnson coming off the screen. So you're so worried about those guys off screens that those guys then will just kind of slide to the basket, get that quick pass off a flare cut, and have a layup or a dunk. That's how Salt gets 80% of his baskets. Wilkins actually has the ability to pick and pop, so he gets, his ratio is not quite as pronounced as it is for Salt. But so where you get Duke's bigs potentially in trouble, especially Carter, because he's the one who's foul prone, is you make them fight through those screens, and that's what Virginia does well. They'll run, as numbing as it can be to anyone who doesn't love Virginia basketball, all the ESPN folks out there, everything else. That the 20 to 25 to 28 seconds they take off the shot clock every possession, they're not standing there dribbling the ball at half court with nothing going on. Those guys are setting screens and then rolling, and you're going to see Carter get a couple early fouls, and then Coach Hayes is going to have a decision to make. Do I leave him out there with a couple of fouls? Do I roll the dice that way, or do I have to go to my bench, which isn't very deep? That's going to be the key to this game, is if Virginia can get a couple cheap ones early on Carter, and I think they do.
Excellent. I'm looking at the ACC standings. There aren't anybody 3-3 in here. It looks like I was checking those last night while games were still in play. But what I'm also looking at is Virginia having commanding two game
lead over everybody. Yeah,
over everybody, and the two closest are the ones they play in back-to-back. It's crazy to think that in January, Virginia could wrap up the ACC. I mean,
yeah, they win.
I mean, they win Duke and Louisville. They're saddling those teams with 3 losses,
and they'd be
10-0.
Yeah.
And you can just
the head-to-head over Duke. They're only playing once this year, so yeah, that would be it too. ESPN, their BPI runs numbers all the time. They do this all the time. If Virginia loses this game, there's still an 87% chance to get a number 1 seed in the NCAA tournament, according to ESPN's BPI. They win, they're a 98% chance. So for 98, 88, in that range. Duke, if they win, 65% chance to get a number 1 in the NCAA tournament. They lose 38%. So, again, Virginia fans hear this, and if you look at message boards, people are just waiting for the sky to fall in. I mentioned a broken pinky. Justin Anderson broke his pinky 3 years ago. A Virginia team that also was 19-1 at one point in the season, and that kind of that obviously took the wind out of the sails of that team. London Parentes and his appendix issue the next year kind of gave us, and I think even the year that Anderson had his broken pinky, the win over Florida State at home on a Sunday night, we had a loose ball where Parentes and Brogdon banged heads, and we were about both those guys for the rest of that game. So, yeah, Virginia fans are waiting for something stupid like that to happen, but this team's looking pretty good right now in a lot of ways.
Interesting, that Florida State game, I named – this is so stupid, but you bring back the memories. I'm playing Hearts on my phone during that time period, and you name the players of the Hearts because it's each computer 2, 3, and 4. And still, to this day, one of the names of the players in Hearts is Bloody Brogdon from that game.
From that game,
and that was Carson's suggestion. So, holy cow, what a great memory. Yeah, the ACC. They're still projecting maybe 9 teams total getting into the dance. I mean, you got to figure in this. Speaking of bloody, the bloody battles that are going on in the ACC. If you can finish 500, you ought to be able to get a ticket to that dance. And there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 of those teams right now. I ask you pretty much every Thursday, where are we now, and who are the double bye teams that are sitting out there, and we're starting to experience a little bit of separation. Odd game with North Carolina and Virginia Tech. Looking at the landscape of the ACC, where are we now? What are the top 4 teams you think that are coming out of there?
The clear 2 are still just Virginia and Duke, and I still think that there's a lot of back and forth when you look at who goes from 3 to maybe 8. I know Louisville's 5-2 right now, for example. They lost last night in overtime at Miami. I got to watch a good bit of that game, and I was not impressed with either team. And they're both teams that are going to be NCAA tournament teams, just not cohesive on offense, either team. And I don't want to give the defenses too much credit there. It just seemed like the offense has made the defense's job much easier in that game, and those are at least one well-coached team, Jim Larinaga, and a well-recruited team, the former Rick Pitino team that now it was David Padgett is the interim coach there. so Louisville can't come back to the pack. Carolina certainly came back to the pack. That vexing loss at Virginia Tech. As much that they lost as also how they lost. That was a beatdown.
Yeah.
I mean, by a Virginia Tech team that had not played well really since losing at Kentucky. That was the last good effort we saw from Virginia Tech, and it was in a loss at Kentucky, who's now in the top 25. So Carolina's back to the pack. And Miami was undefeated for a long time this season, and they've lost 4 games now. They hold off Louisville last night at home, but they blew that game to Duke the last Monday night. Or I guess it was the big Monday last week. Had a big lead against Duke at home and blew that game. So I still think there's a lot of movement there. Syracuse isn't getting a lot of attention. They've got some losses, and Notre Dame still got the issue with Colson being out, and they lost another depth guy this week too for a few weeks. So. I think that 1 and 2 are at this point, because of the rest of the flux between 3 and 8, maybe 3 and 9. 1 and 2 are really set now. It's really just a matter of who gets those other 2 double byes. But I think it could go to any of between Carolina, Miami, Louisville, Syracuse as an outside shot. They'd have to get hot because they've lost some games. I don't know that Notre Dame's even in the mix for that. So maybe Carolina and Louisville, despite the fact that they've suffered some bad losses this week, maybe they're the favorites of that group, but I still think there's some movement there.
Yeah, it's pretty insane. I mean, Louisville loses a coach, Clemson loses a senior, Notre Dame
and I
loses
didn't
a
mention
leader.
Clemson. Yeah, we saw them quickly about Clemson. I feel terrible for Brad Brownell. Scott and I talked about this on the post game the other night. This was a make or break year for him, and you start 16-3, 5-2. You get a big win over Notre Dame. You lose your second best player, Dante Grantham, for the season to an ACL. He's a senior. He's done. And we saw the other night now, part of that is you're playing Virginia and Charlottesville, and they're hot right now, but part of that also is you're still figuring out who you are. I want to think they'll figure out who they are, but he wasn't playing. He was only playing 7 guys, a 7-man rotation before they lost Grantham. They've got some work to do, and the ACC is not a great place to have work to do in the middle of the season.
No, I do. Every time I think I'm having a bad week, I just got to think of Brownell's week when he loses Zion and loses Grantham in the same, within 3 or 4 days, and you're just like, that Clemson fan base is probably the inverse of Virginia's fan base. They're like, I can't wait for football, and we're like, can't wait for football to be over.
I actually said this out loud to my wife the other night. I said, I'm all for banning football now. Let's just start basketball in August. Play it all the way through. That would be the ideal for me.
Yeah, that's crazy. And I love the fact that we have got to be the only team that's ranked number 2 in the country that can still play that they don't respect us card. I hear it in the post-game comments. It's wonderful. Tom Crean, I'm watching. You're at the game. I'm at home. I'm scrolling through on ESPN. And there's Tom Crean, and I don't know how he ends up as an ESPN commentator.
You lose your job.
Yeah, that's one way to do it.
Yeah.
And he's going to lose his commentating job here soon because they're asking about his Final Fours. He goes through this laundry list of teams for the number 1 seeds that he's projecting, and he doesn't even mention Virginia. He's throwing Gonzaga in there. He's throwing Duke in there. I'm like, hey, dude, check the standings.
It's
the best team in the
2018,
country you forgot to mention. It just makes me laugh. But I love it because the rest of that locker room, and Tony will not let it be unknown that no one's still giving them love until they beat Duke.
Until they beat, and this was the game. The 2014-2015 team was, I mentioned, 19-1. They were actually 19-0 at one point, and the one happened on game day in Charlottesville, a Saturday night game with Duke. They had game day there from 9 to noon. The kid hits the half-court shot, wins his tuition. Everybody's happy. Virginia's leading most of that game. And Duke led the first 10 minutes. Virginia had a double-digit lead in the second half. And then Duke finished out. I figured it out. They scored 22 points in their last 8 possessions of that game against Virginia. 22 points on 8 possessions. They hit 6 of 7 3-pointers in that stretch after going 2 of
1
11.
being the one that bounces 5-6 feet in the air off the rim.
That was at Duke, actually. That was at Duke. No, they were 6 of 7 from 3-point range after going 2 of 11, 2 of 12 to that point. And the one they missed, they dunked in. They tipped in a tip dunk. So, that was just after that game, I wrote, that was God's hand coming down from heaven saying Duke's going to win this game. 22 points against Virginia on 8 possessions. Duke had 47 points with 5 minutes to go in that game. Finished with 69. So, but that said, that's the obstacle now. That team lost to Duke. That loss is what made that Virginia team with a 29-3 regular season record a number 2 seed because they lost to Duke that year at home. So, and that Duke team won the national championship. A lot of folks think that was Virginia's national championship. If Duke had been the number 2 seed and had to play Michigan State, and we were number 1 playing San Diego State, we're not losing that game, and they're probably not winning that game. And so anyway, that's an obstacle game. And now this year the game's in Durham. So, but a 19-1 record. I mean, everything's lining up. You know, I even talked about people have seen the tweet, I'm sure. Last time Virginia won in Durham, 1995. Corey Alexander played for that team actually. And Virginia's game before the game with that Duke team was a game against number 18 Clemson. Not 1995. I didn't realize Clemson would have been number 18 in 1995, but I think Rick Barnes was still around, so that's probably why. Virginia won that game 61-37. Eerie.
Yeah, it's a shame they didn't get one more free throw. We'll have to see what happens. It's fascinating that we have a conversation about the ACC basketball, and the only time we talk about Carolina is the slamming and the odd way they played in Castle Coliseum.
And let me jump in here real quick. How do you think that Tech and Carolina fans liked watching that game and hearing all that love at halftime for Virginia? You talked about the lack of respect. That night there was a lot of respect for Virginia. The halftime talk was all about Tony Bennett being the national coach of the year, and then about a minute to go, game's long since a blowout, and Jay Billis goes on about, well, Virginia's going to win the ACC, and Bennett's the coach of the year, and pretty much they ought to rename the earth after Tony Bennett, and so Tech fans can't revel in that big victory over Carolina, and the Carolina fans who are still hanging around have to listen to that too. So. That was a nice night for Virginia.
That was. Billis speaks the truth, and it's one of the few times that I can recall ever rooting for Virginia Tech. I don't know why you just want to put your foot on Carolina's neck when they're down, and they are down.
They're down.
And we've talked about why isn't Roy Williams fired after some of the alleged academic scandals. He didn't have to get fired. His recruiting is getting crushed, and the rest of the ACC is whispering about Roy not being there. I don't know how, Duke gets the top 3 players in the country, and Carolina just can't seem to reload. It is a totally different team than the national championship.
And it's not like, Roy Williams is 6 years younger than Coach K. He was he's defending national champion. 2 years ago, he was in the final game and lost at the buzzer on a three-pointer. And Duke, the last 2 years, they Sweet 16 and second round. So, you saw the difference this year with Carolina. They lost a lot. Justin Jackson was eventually going to leave. The 2 post guys. They surprising. There was a freshman post guy who decided he was good enough to play in the NBA, and that's where because when you recruit for a 4-year system, and that's to Roy's credit. I don't like giving Carolina much credit for anything, especially after that cheating scandal.
Don't do it.
But I'm going to give him credit. Don't do it. He recruits and coaches a 4-year system. Coach K doesn't. These kids at Duke, I would be willing to wager that they're not going to class right now because they don't have to take them. When by the time midterms comes up, they're going to be done. The 5 kids who are the 5 freshmen of the 6 who are on that team. So Coach K is doing it the wrong way. Roy's doing it the right way. Now, unfortunately for him, he had a recruiting hole this year. So even with the recruiting hole, he's still ranked number 10 in the country. They won't be ranked number 10 Monday, but so I'll give him credit. And I think more credit needs to be given to guys like him and Jay Wright, Tony Bennett, the coaches who coached the 4-year systems, because it's relatively easy, so to speak. If you just say we're going to roll the ball out there and we're going to recruit the top 3 guys in the country, they're going to be here for 3 months. We'll play zone defense and we'll see how we do. In the one and done era, which dates back 10, 12 years, 2 champions of that era have been one and done teams. One Kentucky team, one Duke team. The Duke teams are just as likely to lose the first weekend. And in fact, they're more likely to lose the first weekend than they are to win a championship. Because since Duke went one and done 4 years ago, they've got 1 championship. They lost their first game once. They lost their second game once. They lost their third game once. So that's how it's rolling the dice with these young guys. They're talented as heck, but they don't have the cohesiveness that groups like Virginia do.
Be fascinating to see what happens Saturday, and if Virginia can finally get that monkey off their back, get that victory, then we truly will be playing as David in the Goliath world, because people still just don't give us a whole lot of credit or respect. And I'm very thankful for Villanova just because it's nice to be number 2.
I'll say this, okay, a couple things. One, if Virginia wins that game, Villanova wins at Marquette. A lot of talk about Virginia jumping Villanova and going number 1. That'd be the most impressive win of the season at Duke. I mean, you know, a lot has to happen, including a win at Duke. But the other thing I'd say is 4 o'clock on Saturday, if Virginia wins that game, and I've laid out the case for how they can win the game. There's a lot of reasons they won't win this game. It's at Duke. Duke needs this win. I mean, Virginia needs the win. Virginia would love the win. Duke needs this win for lots of reasons.
BC and NC State being 2 of them.
Yeah, being 2 of them, I think the ACC kind of wants Duke to. You know, I'll throw the conspiracy theory thing out there. I think we're going to watch the game. We're going to see some Grayson Allen taking 4 steps to the ball kind of things. You know, so it's going to happen. But that said, okay, throw all that aside. If Virginia has more points on the scoreboard and the final seconds are gone down, what's our world like then, Jeff?
Well,
what kind of people are we after that? I'm not a nice person.
No, I think there's going to be some venomous activity potentially on Facebook and social media. Well, and I think we'll finally be able to beat our chest. I love watching when the cameras scan into some of the ACC stands and the students are like, "We're number 1." No, you're not. Just put up the U sign and have fun.
Yeah.
If we win that game, A, you and I are going to be very difficult to be around for a while. And B, we should vault Villanova. I mean, who goes and beats a number 18 ranked team, albeit damaged, 61-36, and then big if, beats Duke on Coach K's floor.
Yeah, with that team,
you're the number 1 team in the country.
Yeah, because that team is they've lost twice on the road. I mean, that's not an excuse. They lost at BC and NC State, but that's a good collection of talent. And this is you know, in some ways I talk about how they don't have a dribble drive guy. Those 2 guys, Bagley is going to be the number 1 pick in the draft, and he's going to change whatever franchise he lands with. I don't know that any of the other players we're talking about on that Duke team are going to change their franchises, but I mean, I think of this Bagley kid, I think he's a once every 7 or 8 years kind of player, and we got to guard him with Jack Salt. I mean, maybe you put Wilkins on him for some time.
Jack is going to be managing someone's portfolio in 10 years.
I'll point out my lead here to my story. Duke freshman Marvin Bagley III will hear his name called first in the Junior NBA draft. Virginia center Jack Salt will almost certainly be going pro in something other than sports. You know, using that NCAA commercial tagline. So, I mean, yeah, and because Salt's got to guard somebody. He's got to guard either the number 1 pick in the draft, who I think is a transformational, once-in-a-generation player, or he's got to guard the other guy who's a lottery pick. And Wilkins is 6'7". Wilkins is the best-rated defensive player in the country, but he's 6'7". And I think there are people who point out that he's 6'7" with an asterisk, because DeAndre Hunter's a couple inches taller than him, and DeAndre Hunter's also 6'7". So, I mean, yeah, if we win that game, Jeff, Waynesboro will be interesting, among other places in Virginia. There will be lots of really big heads floating around. Yeah, Victory Cigars in your case.
Oh, yes.
The ABC store may go out of Fireball in my case, and yeah, it's so.
I've been posting next on social media since the ACC started with this game in mind. And so we'll see.
I want to jump on that point too. A few weeks ago, I mean, you probably did this too, but I know, I'm trying to think. Is that maybe after the BC game, even certainly after the Carolina game? You know, you start looking at the schedule and saying, well, if we don't get tricked up here and hiccups here and there, we're going to be 19-1 going to that game at Duke. And when this started, I mean, even as recently as the BC game, the 1-point win over BC to start ACC play, I think we were still ranked like 12 or 13. I mean, who foresaw even then? And that's not even a month ago. That was December 30th. Who foresaw 19-1, number 2 in the country, with a more than legitimate shot to beat Duke on their floor? I mean, yeah, we're homers like crazy. Nah, we didn't see this coming.
And I got a kick out of it. The ESPN picks their games, and we are relegated to NBC, Southwest, CE, left, right. I have no idea what the hell channel they're putting us on. And then I'm watching Oklahoma and Kansas, and I'm thinking, Virginia smokes both those teams.
Oh God,
that may be a little bold.
Trey Young, the point guard, would have 8 points on 4 of 40 shooting.
Hall could shut down Trey Young.
Oh yeah.
Now the Trey that's dishing, I think, is more dangerous than the Trey that's constantly shooting. So I'll be curious to see what Oklahoma looks like in this new ideation of the team. And Kansas is Kansas. I mean, they've got the blue blood in them, but for some reason, I think Virginia's destiny this year. And I am personally tired of every Carolina fan because their team kind of is down this year. Had a really awful effort against Virginia Tech. Whenever Virginia starts throwing their chest out, wants to talk about their banners. Screw your banners. We got banners too, just not in basketball. What have you done for me yesterday?
I heard
this
joke in an ACC tournament, and it was 20 years ago, but it applies now about Carolina. I heard it was a guy wearing an orange blazer, probably graduated from UVA in like 1885, and he's talking about it. There was a lady in our section at the ACC tournament, when I was a fan still, a student actually at UVA, a lady in our section who married a UVA guy. She lived in Richmond. She was a Carolina grad, and complaining about how it's so hard to be a Carolina grad living in Richmond and with the UVA husband because they always win all the games and all this, how tough life is on her because she's got to deal with all these UVA people around her. This old codger comes up. I mean, the guy probably went to school with Jefferson. He comes up and says, "Hey, did you hear about the big tragedy on the campus of Carolina today?" And no, I didn't hear. Well, fire destroyed several buildings, including the library. And she, oh my God, I hadn't heard. This is pre-internet era. You couldn't check your phone. Yeah, that wasn't the worst thing. All the books destroyed, everything else, but worst thing was 2 of them weren't even colored in yet. I didn't hear. The woman sat beside us the rest of the weekend. I didn't hear a word out of her mouth. That was 20 years ago, right around the time that African American Studies program that nobody went to class for started. Funny how those things have legs. Those kind of jokes have legs. So your banners are great. You might not be accredited next year, so
right.
Good for that.
We had talked in the opening about getting into some XFL, but I think we've covered. I think we may have to save that for another week because we've got plenty of opportunity. But it's just too exciting thinking about the joy of Virginia and Duke and what they've done so far halfway through the ACC slate and what it's going to look like at the end of the ACC. And boy, wouldn't it be crazy if they could rest a hair? Well, we shall see. A lot of exciting things going on at the AFP game coverage. Right now, Chris has got on his site sort of a number of different stories related to how Virginia can take down Duke and the matchups. You and Scott will be are you guys blogging during the game even though it's away?
I'll be blogging during the game. Scott will probably join in. Actually, Scott's a little superstitious, so he probably won't be blogging. But I'll be taking care of that. Scott, he'll still text me during the game. He'll text me his angry thoughts.
It's like Tony and Wilbon. Y'all are just sending texts back and forth, in different living rooms during the game.
Yeah. So I'll know what he's saying. You won't know what he's saying. I might throw a thought or two in from Scott. But yeah, I'll be live blogging. So I've probably got 1 or 2 more ideas for game previews. This is the Super Bowl for us. This game itself, this is the most challenging game we'll play until the Elite Eight, because this team's going to play that far. And so, yeah, let's get ready for it.
Yeah, let's have a blast. So stay close to AFP for all your UVA sports. For Chris Graham, I am Jeff Fife, and go Hoos.